Committee Room 30, signed. 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 Committee Room 30, Committee Room 30, signed. 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 Committee Room 30, Committee Room 30, signed. 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 Committee Room 30, Sound. 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 Committee Room 30, Sound.
Hey colleagues, good morning and welcome to today's meeting for the Committee for the Economy. Rules in relation to the operation of the committee apply as normal. We'll start with apologies, Kate, and declarations of interest, members, if any. None?
Can I just the AI bit has been part of the AC in the last little while, just to declare membership there.
Okay. At all. Item 3 then, chairperson's business. Members, the committee held an informal session at Balmoral on the 13th of May 2026 to gather views on petroleum exploration licensing. Are the committee content to contact the department to seek a copy of the Keeling schedule of the bill, the equality impact assessment, screening documents and delegated powers memorandum? Members content?
Great.
Okay, and then similar for the utility regulator support for decarbonisation bill, seeking the Keeling schedule, equality impact assessment, screening documents and delegated power memorandum. Members content?
Great.
Thank you. We've received correspondence that a delegation from Trade Northern Ireland met with the Secretary of State of Northern Ireland and the Chair of the Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee last week to promote the use of targeted tax levers to unlock growth here in Northern Ireland. Are members content to undertake an evidence session in the future jointly with the Committee for Finance in relation to Trade NI's asks for Northern Ireland? Members content? Thank you. Draft minutes and members are at page 7 of the pack from the 6th of May. Members content I sign those as a true and accurate reflection. Agree. And if there are no matters arising, then we'll move straight to item 6, which is the Local Innovation Partnership Funds. The committee will receive evidence from officials in respect of the Local Innovation Partnership Fund and refer members to page 36, 44, 75 and 82 of the pack. You're all very welcome. So we've got Mark Lee, who's Head of Economic Policy, Professor Helen McCarthy, who is the CSTA, Dr. Adrian Johnson, Innovation Commissioner for Belfast, and Professor Johan Rhodes, who looks after the Health Innovation Research Alliance. Members, can I welcome our guests to the committee and hand over to them at this stage?
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be here to talk to you about this new but also very exciting initiative, which is incredibly important for us as a whole. The Local Innovation Partnership Fund is a 500 million UKRI-led programme. It was announced in July 2025 and essentially it is earmarked 30 million each for 10 regions across the UK. There were 7 regions in England and then there is a Glasgow City region, a Cardiff Capital region, and we lobbied incredibly hard to ensure that we had a Belfast Derry, London Derry corridor and region as well to have this earmarked £30 million. What essentially by securing this, we then had to put together a programme of how we would go about ensuring this. And this feeds into what we're trying to do in the wider research and innovation landscape. We set up an innovation panel. And we set up that innovation panel essentially to have government, and also this is also DFE, councils. In addition to that, we also had Invest NI. We also had academics round the table for the first time, so Queen's and Ulster were represented, cognizant of the fact that everybody has conflict, but this is about working together for the greater good. And we also had industry representatives round the table as well. Very kindly, Adrian and Joanne agreed that they would oversee 2 of the clusters that came forward. You might say, how did we go about doing this? Well, the focus of this from UKRI was that the regional area knows what it needs best, and that was what we were really focusing on. There was an emphasis on economic impact, so any of the projects that would be put forward had to give a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 return on investment, which is critical. And it was triple helix cluster development, so you had to have industry, government and academia all working together. And essentially what we're trying to do is make sure that we got most return on investment. We then convened the innovation panel on 3 occasions. We had a number of different workshops and we worked closely with the UKRI devolved administration team to basically ensure that we got the best projects put forward. You might ask, how did we go out and do this? What we did was we went out and we asked for proof of concepts, we asked for expressions of interest to begin with, and the innovation panel then assessed those expressions of interest. Then what we did was we identified 2 different clusters. The innovation panel decided who would go forward in this, so I want to really emphasise there were 13 people on the innovation panel. Although I chaired the innovation panel, I did not make any decisions, and I think that's really important because you're there as a neutral broker in all of this.
Helen, who was on the panel then?
Okay, who was on the panel? So obviously we had Adrian, Joanne, we had yourself, Mark.
Yep.
We also had Brendan McGuigan from Invest NI. We had Professor Lorraine Martin, Associate Pro-Vice Chancellor for Enterprise in Queen's University. We had Professor Liam McGuire, PVC for Research in Ulster. And as you give me the list, we had Suzanne Wiley, CEO, NI Chamber of Commerce, John Walsh, Belfast City Council, John Kelpie, Chair of Derry and Strabane Council, Richard Kennedy, who was the Global VP for Biomarker Development in Almac, and we had Joanne Allison, was a devolved administration UKRI representative, who worked incredibly closely with us. So what we've achieved in a short space of time has been really phenomenal, and that is actually testimony to a couple of the people sitting behind us here who were just always on call and really worked to be a fantastic secretariat in this. And we have successfully submitted 3 proposals to UKRI within the time frame, and the strap line for it is accelerating innovations to market, and that's what we're all about. Very happy to take any questions. Appreciate that this is new, but I should point out that we see this as the nexus for the new way of working going forward.
Thank you very much for that. So £30 million has been earmarked then for Northern Ireland. What was the total bids that then have been submitted to the UK government?
33.4 million, I believe, yes.
Across how many projects?
3.
3 projects. So if I just read the projects, and listen, I'm no expert in this, but they're not the easiest to understand. So digitally enabled formulation and pilot scale manufacturing to accelerate the region's first sciences pipeline. What does that mean for a layperson like me?
The manufacture of small-scale medicines.
Okay.
So if you think about the regional city deals that we've invested in, and also the Strengthened Places bid that was successful, that was the Future Medicines Institute. So that does drug discovery, and then up in Coleraine you have the Centre for Food and Drugs. So that's the discovery phase.
Yep.
You'll also be aware of the clinical trials centre that's being built, iReach, and there's clinical trial facilities up in Magee as well. So that's your clinical bit. What we're missing is this little bit in the middle. Now, there's a trick in this, okay? So it's not just iterative, as in you manufacture and you manufacture. We have a core framework across all the projects, and the core framework is digital twinning. So how do we digital twin the manufacture of medicines? And then the other thing is cybersecurity and AI. So how do we incorporate that cyber bubble around what we do, and AI capability in this as well? So I think that's really important. And you may say, why was that project selected? The 4 of our larger pharma industries that we do have here identified that they would all love to have a digital twin to accelerate their medicines manufacture, but they weren't going to individually invest in this. And because this is so cutting edge, this is how it was co-created. But this took a number of workshops. This was not, the final project was not in the first instance, but I think it's incredibly exciting.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us any more detail about then any of the other projects across the other 2?
But I'm going to switch to my colleague Adrian, who's going to talk about that.
Thanks, Helen. Yes, Chair. I think one of the things we'd say is, even going through the initial assessment panel where we had the expressions of interest, one of the things that we really do independently was try to convene different projects together as one portfolio of projects, and that's what we did in the energy systems and autonomous transport cluster. What we have in there, when we talk about one project, there's actually multiple partners associated with that, based on the key assets that we've got here within the region. So, Digital Catapult actually have the National Digital Twin Centre, which is located in Belfast. It's a UK-wide centre located here in the city and co-funded through Department for the Economy. Really, what digital twinning is very complex products. Think of Navantia as a ship. Could you digitally simulate Navantia as a ship, make changes to the construction of that without actually having to physically prototype it? So it reduces the manufacturing costs of really complex products, but also allows you to accelerate them to market quicker. So we wanted to use that to underpin autonomous transport. So how can we do that with land-based, maritime-based and air-based transport in that complex environment, while also then bringing together partners around energy systems. Right. So if we're going to go autonomous and electric and green transport, we need to also look at the infrastructure for that. So we brought partners both in the energy infrastructure side, as well as the transport side, as well as the digitally enabled side together as part of that, and built that consortium out. So we've successfully did that through a number of workshops, but that allows us then to look at the end-to-end, if you want to say the end-to-end innovation cluster, which will be the first of its type in the UK. So we bring local technology providers, whether that's in energy or transport. They can also access this real-world test environment that we will have as a city. So we'll be able to test the autonomous transport and energy systems in the city, and give it accessibility to FDI that might want to come here to the region to use it, or startups as well. So really exciting project for us.
So that's under the second one, is it? The transport, energy and port
Yes.
systems? Okay. And then the third one?
I mean, the third one essentially is a green accelerator. So how do we accelerate some of our brightest technologies that come out? And that's also looking at energy as well in that space.
It is, but it's looking more at so one of the issues that we have, Chair, is we have a really strong startup community here.
Yep.
We see the levels of investment. The recent figures back in 2024 was 143 million of equity investment came into Northern Ireland for startups. The issue that we have is that next level investment. How do we scale that up? That's why these projects are really important, because they give investor confidence that we've got an ecosystem that allows those businesses to scale to multinationals or large scale businesses, unicorns if you like. This other project is about bringing some of that equity investment to that ecosystem that we're building out across the two clusters, for example, in pharma and transport and energy.
Is the 33 split equally across the 3?
Not quite, no. There's some differences across it. I think the projects are currently under review at the moment, so from a governance perspective, we can't give too much detail,
Sure.
but there's nobody is getting a high chunk of it. It's relatively comparable across it. I think one of the key things that's come out of this, though, is we've also identified other projects as well, using healthcare data that we are going to work up so that we're ready to go with future opportunities as they come to us. I don't know if you want to say something about that, Joanne.
I was just going to say, so one of our core assets in Northern Ireland is integrated health and social care, and then the investment in the Encompass programme, and at the moment it would provide a huge opportunity for us to be able to leverage that. This would require cross-department working, so engagement with health and economy. So I think there's a large legacy in medtech development that would utilise this data, but we didn't have the time to work that project up. But I think what's really exciting is that it's been identified and it will be taken forward to work that up for a future potential funding pot. But I think the interest that we've seen, we've had the Medicines Health and Regulations Agency just announced a base in Northern Ireland. They're very interested in how that can be utilised. So I think it bodes well for working up a future project that we can then attract industry investment. We've also just signed a Northern Ireland-wide industry MOU with AstraZeneca UK, which is UK's largest pharma company, who are very interested in unlocking that. So I think it's given us a lot of resources to then build forward into the future project. So I think that's really quite exciting, and it's something that Northern Ireland is now uniquely recognised for, and we're seeing a lot of interest, and I expect more industry collaborations to flow through that, and then we'll be able to build a much stronger project to attract matched funding.
And then what's the next step then?
So the next step is on the 4th of June, myself and Adrian and Joanne will go in front of the UKRI panel to fill in any gaps that they might have with the actual projects. Then we're due to hear back in July, and the projects will commence then over the next, I think it's about 5 to 7 year time frame. And the innovation panel that oversees the whole thing will get the updates and the reports of the projects. But this is more of a new way of working so that we can prepare for what's next. So we've all heard of the UK Industrial Strategy, and it has 8 panels and it's got another 5 extra panels added to it. You'll know that the Matrix report came out on engineering biology. That's one of the industrial strategy panels. You may know that the next Matrix report is on quantum technologies. That's one of the industrial strategy panels. So what we're going to do is form a regional industrial strategy panel so that we can be prepared and make sure that we put our best foot forward. One of the criticisms that we've had in the past is we have fantastic technologies and people, but sometimes the integration of the bids and also the quality threshold of the bids is not where it needs to be. So this is about elevating all of that to where it needs to be and to make us more competitive and to showcase what we have.
Excellent. So Mark, what role does the department have? You didn't contribute anything financially to this, is that right?
Not financially, no. So we have a kind of secretariat role. So this funding is coming through UKRI, kind of UK agency. So my team, it probably undersells it a bit to say provided that secretariat function. So supporting Helen's chair, establishing the panel, doing a lot of that to and fro with UKRI, making sure we understand what the requirements are, working on the draft bids that went in, making sure that they met the requirements. Making sure we've got kind of cluster meetings that are happening and that kind of engagement happening with partners across the system. So it's a kind of facilitation, coordination, kind of gathering kind of role, making sure that what Northern Ireland puts in was absolutely top notch and met the requirements that UKRI set. And
bids are 33 million, allocations 33. Has there been any thoughts to, if the full bids are needed, that the department might contribute?
We'll see what comes back from UKRI in June on that one. I think, as Helen and others were saying, I think this process has been helpful in terms of actually some bids that maybe weren't even quite ready to go to UKRI will be there ready for future opportunities. We know the financial position in Northern Ireland is a very challenging one. Obviously, we'll look to be as helpful as we can where opportunities arise, but we'll also look to see how we can encourage the UK government to put funding in certain areas, work with the Irish government, look at Peace Plus funding, for instance. So we'll look at all opportunities for funding, where there are gaps or where there are good projects that haven't been funded.
And finally, just for me, obviously there's been a huge amount of different funding streams from UK government, so city growth deals, enhanced economic investment zone, Dublin, Belfast economic corridor. Are we doing any work in trying to bring all of these pieces of work together and strategies together that we have one overall Northern Ireland economic growth master plan?
So we've I guess there's two elements to that. One is a sort of coordination piece,
Yep.
And you might have views to express, Helen, but so making sure, for instance, Kieran McGarity, who you hear from regularly about city deals, I think was part of the panel looking at this, and the projects that we've chosen do, as you've heard, build on some of the city deal and indeed the Strength in Places investment for the Future Medicines Institute. So we've ensured there's an alignment there and a coordination between those different funding streams. The other piece is actually our own kind of focus on particular clusters underpins that. So we know that Northern Ireland has a really good proposition in life and health sciences. We know we've got great propositions in sort of the advanced manufacturing side and those kind of areas. So that knowledge of where our strengths are has underpinned the focus that's come through EIZ, the investments that's made in city deals and the projects that were picked here.
Yeah, maybe if I could just come in on that, the innovation panel, but anytime we have important stakeholders that come over, we bring all the regional city deal leads round the table to make sure they're included in all the discussions, and we make sure that we are working together and coordinated. I completely take your point though about a coordinated strategy. And we're trying to get the research and innovation strategy out for consultation, but within that we're thinking about, and I understand it's difficult to kind of follow all the disparate little pieces of it. We want to bring it in under the one umbrella, ideally in a research NI type of thing, so that becomes what SFI was 25 years ago and is now Research Ireland or Research England. That's where we're going. But we had to prove the concept that this innovation panel could work and that we could truly put what we need as a country first over our own individual interests, which was really important.
Wasn't easy trying to keep some of the stakeholders who just, not just a parochial view, but a view that actually going to move the economic.
Absolutely,
data.
yeah.
No, that's perfect. Declan.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks for coming in, folks. In the papers, the reference is made to the Intertrade 2024 study on clustering, and I wanted to know to what extent is that study integrated within the DFE planning strategy?
So that has influenced the kind of funding that Invest and I has provided to support clusters. We're thinking a bit more as a department around, do we need a more kind of formal cluster policy or cluster strategy to kind of sit over that, but the focus has really been how do we take that evidence and turn that into practical support on the ground. So I think we have seen some of the bids that have come through have been underpinned by the clusters that have been invested in.
We certainly advocate in the research and innovation strategy that we need to properly evaluate our clusters, and we need to make sure that we grade them from nascent to mature, because there's a life cycle and a pipeline with them, and as they mature, sometimes they change and they move. So it's definitely a piece of work that I think we need to get a more thorough framework around that for sure.
So, following on from that then, could you explain the departmental partnering with the Department of Enterprise Employment in Dublin, along with Intertrade, to promote overall clustering development?
Yep, so...
bottom that out for me.
Bottom out, okay. So as well as the kind of Invest and I work around clusters, I think Intertrade Ireland are funding some cross-border cluster work, and obviously the kind of work's overseen by both departments, North and South. We meet regularly as two departments to discuss kind of key economic strategies and issues and coordinate where that makes sense. We were down a few weeks ago discussing with them there. So conversations happening and Intertrade Ireland playing an important role in cross-border clustering. Yeah,
we do have a couple that are really very, very active. The All Ireland Cancer Research cluster. We've also got an All Ireland Vaccine cluster as well. And Joanne, you know quite a lot about this, don't you? Because you're involved.
Yeah, there's a number of life science clusters, and there's been a number of meetings, one late last year, around the cluster in Cork that is a pharmaceutical cluster, and then some of the digital health clusters in Galway and Dundalk. And my organisation's been linking with them to think through what a future all-island opportunity could be for economic development, to connect those clusters better and to build on the strengths of those clusters.
And we had a I was at the North-South PermSec meeting that we had last week, and I was sitting with Colin O'Riordan from De Ferris, and we were talking about they've just approved a whole suite of massive research centres. Some of them are continuations, etc. But we have an invite to go down and to find out more about that, and I'm really keen to understand how they've gone about doing that. And obviously their budgets are entirely different to our budgets, but nevertheless I'm keen to see how do we make sure that our Northern Irish researchers are part of all of this, and a lot of them are involved in, for example, some of the massive research centres they have down there. They have a pharmaceutical one, they have a medical devices one, Curum, coming out of Galway. So there's a lot of good work going on. I think it probably would be useful for you to maybe have an overview of what that work actually is on an All-Ireland basis, because very interestingly, the Higher Education Authority put a call out, I think about 18 months ago, for projects between North and South. And these were follow-on projects from the original ones, and there was only about 4 available. And I think they got over 400 applications. So there's a massive appetite to work across the whole island.
Thank you. Thanks, Philip.
Thank you very much indeed, Declan. Deputy Chair.
Thank you, and thank you all very much for coming. Helen, it's great to hear how passionate you are, and thank you very much for fighting hard for Northern Ireland in terms of this funding. You talked a bit about the panel and picking the stuff, the projects out, and it seemed quite academic based, and so it's just my initial thought when you were listing who all was on it, and just keen. Like, I represent South Down, and we have really, really strong work coming through in terms of the airspace and defence sector. I noticed you had it down under the collaborative growth programme, Kilkeel Harbour Network. You've got the fishing, the factories, and a lot of the engineering work coming out of that. Also coming in the back of Balmoral's show, my constituency was really strong, agri-food sector with farmers who are doing a lot of innovative work, testing the soils, and just that wider manufacturing piece. So I'm just keen to understand, how are you bringing through those that aren't just so academic based, because there's a lot of really, really good innovation. We've also got some really successful logistics firms and things in my area as well. So I'm just wondering, is that getting picked up on that, and just conscious of those on the panel and how that's being directed?
They are very good points. So I've just spent the last 2 days with Dame Angela McLean, who's the government chief scientific advisor, who has come over, and the key conversations we were having was around supply chains and how phenomenal our supply chains are, and as an SME economy we must utilise them, and we do utilise them a lot. I take your point on, you might think that this is academic. It actually isn't. The key criteria for selecting the projects was how industry were involved, and that they had return on investment on working with industry. And if we had have had a phenomenal agri-tech proposal in an EOI phase put in, or some of the other ones from supply chains, they would have been in the mix, absolutely. So I don't want you to think that we are just focusing on those areas. Those were the EOIs that came through to us. So as the chair of the panel, I have to ensure that we have a good governance process in this, and I've been involved in a number of grant panels over the years, and it's my job to ensure that what comes in we give due process and due diligence to. I'm hopeful, and we'll put the word out that there's next time there's calls, that we do want to see those calls from all areas. But the key criteria for the first selection was, have you demonstrated where your return on investment's coming from? And if you haven't, I'm sorry, but that's what this call is about. So you do have to be quite clear on what the objectives of the call actually are.
Absolutely, and I suppose then it is the raising awareness piece and making sure people know to be getting their proposals in. So it's quite new to me, this, so I'm quite keen to do my bit to reach out to make sure they're coming in, because I know there's some fantastic things going on, and I want to see the proposals come through, but totally respect what you're saying. The governance process is crucial here. And in terms of that wider connected health and those projects, have you engagement with them, how this links in with the wider voluntary community sector? I know quite often whenever a lot of the health partners in the projects are coming through, it's not always picked up, and we've seen it through our sort of the departmental structures, that it's not always linking through there, but a lot of that frontline delivery and innovation is coming through the voluntary community sector. Just wondering, is there anything of that coming through?
Where did Joanne?
So my organisation, Harani, coordinates across industry, academia, health, talking about the triple industry, academia and government, including health. talking about the triple helix, but actually we talk about the quintuple helix, we talk about community and voluntary, and actually the patient cohort, and then also the workforce, I guess, within health, as if they were not a publicly funded industry. So we connect through there. As that project develops in Connected Health, for the next programme, we will absolutely ensure that their voices are heard. And in fact, we have a health equity event on Wednesday where we have the chair of AstraZeneca who's coming over to present, the Academy of Medical Sciences, who are a UKRI sort of funded research council, coming over to look at health equity opportunities, and we are making sure that the role of innovation to promote health equity by design is front and centre. So that's absolutely what we're about. So
it's great to hear that. It's like there's so much talent and good things going on in Northern Ireland. It's just bringing all of that together and make sure that it comes through.
I mean, I should probably caveat this with as well. Whenever I spoke to Patrick Valance's team, one of the key things that they wanted to see in the regions that had this funding, they wanted to see that there was a good governance process, and they wanted to see that you could do this. This was almost a test bed to see, can you do this and can you do this really well? Being entirely frank, the reason why Joanne and Adrian are on the panel is because of the EOIs that came in. Had there been EOIs in creative technologies, green tech, well, there's some green, or in agri-tech, or in advanced manufacturing or something like that, we would have had different stakeholders around the table. The point is that we can bring those with expertise in the area, but also will bat for, in inverted commas, NIPLC around the table as and when required, whenever we have got a call coming forward. So that's kind of the goal of where we're trying to get to. And you went to one of the regional events that they had. Do you want to talk about that? Because I think they were quite impressed with how we've managed to work together in a really collaborative way.
Yeah, I suppose one of the things to say is I think the structure that was put in place for managing this particular project is quite unique even across the UK. So on your first question, when you talked about it seems very academic, it's actually the feedback we're getting from other cities across the UK that their proposals are very academic. The reason I think that myself and Joanne were there was to drive that challenge of the ecosystem, right? That it wasn't just about academia, and that's where we broadened out the projects. We led on the broadening out of those projects to ensure that small businesses, large multinationals, startups and entrepreneurs were able to get access to these projects as well, and that's, I think, why they've become so strong. We are quite a bit further forward than most cities in the UK in terms of identifying what the strength of our clusters would be, and therefore the project proposals that came forward. We are quite a bit further forward than that. I suppose if I could just pick up maybe on your point in the community voluntary sector as well. Part of my role as Innovation Commissioner for Belfast is to look at the quadruple helix of that, so the inclusive growth strategy for the city and then the city region as part of BRCD, Belfast Region City Team. So it's very much a focus for ours of the activity that we do, how does it have an economic and a societal benefit from the investments that we make in BRCD. And both Joanne and I sit on panels with Department of Health with that lens as well. So how do we ensure that there's a connection between Department of Communities, Health and Economy with respect to the investments that we make. So.
Thanks very much, and I look forward to hearing how the projects go, and wish you all the best with them. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Sinead?
Sorry for the delay there. Thank you, and thank you for your update. And it's exciting project, certainly, and we'll look forward to see how it all rolls out. Helen, you've spoken about the emphasis has been on the economic impact, and the key objective is actually the return on investment. Can I also ask what measurable targets has the department set in and around job creation, even graduate retention and private investment? And can I specifically ask you about the Foyle constituency and the wider Northwest region of that innovation corridor?
Thanks, Sinead. I think I'm going to go to Adrian on the innovation corridor, because there is a specific application in Foyle Port that's involved in one of the projects. to answer your question on jobs and economic impact, they are coming through the projects. So while the Minister has approved the innovation panel and is happy for the panel to do its job, the actual decision makers in all of this are UKRI, not DFE. And so I don't believe that DFE would be in a position to actually say these are the jobs that will be created. But each of the projects have identified how many jobs will come out of the work that they're doing, and that will be one of the KPIs that we will be measuring. So we will be measuring not only economic impact, social impact, and we'll also be measuring that sort of fiscal impact as well, which I think is really important, and the ability to use this as a launch pad to go on to what's next. So I think that's all we can say at this stage. What we'll have to do as a panel, should the projects be successful, is to decide on the best reporting structures and to decide on what do we need to see to demonstrate that this is working, which to my mind is part of a larger question that we need to have, which is every policy that we have, how do we measure whether it's working or not? So that's what we're going to try and do with this.
And are you using job creation? Sorry, are you using job creation as
Yes.
As one of your measures?
Yes, we will be using job creation. We haven't set the KPIs up yet because the projects haven't started. But yes, and in the projects, each of the projects detailed how many jobs would be created, and I believe it's quite a significant number through all of this. Yeah. But each of the projects have detailed at the back what their impacts will actually be. You want to talk about?
Yeah, okay, Adrian. Sorry.
So actually, if you want to pick up on the Northwest Corridor aspect of the project, so we've had active conversations with Foyle Port as well around their ambitions. So if you think of the earlier comment that I made around transport systems and energy systems, what we really want and what businesses need is real-world test and validation environments for those two things. And Foyle Port is uniquely positioned with Colquera close to it to be an energy systems test bed, if you like. So that's the conversation we've had with Ian Lunny, who's now the new Chief Executive of Foyle Port, and his team up there. We've also had conversations with Ulster University through Liam Maguire and Professor Jim Harkin around the intelligent systems capability that exists within the McGee campus and how that can be used for digital twinning capability, and they're already integrated into that overall project. So we would see that sort of combination between potentially Belfast Harbour and Foyle Port, where that combination comes between both maritime and energy systems test beds. That's how that will be pulled together. The one area, what I should emphasise as well on this, we see this project as very much a starting point. So the ambitions for Foyle Port are probably over the next 5 to 7 years, and one of the areas that we're going to support them on is around digitisation of that port. So the physical or the digital infrastructure that they need to be able to participate in a project like this and to start looking at energy systems innovation, we're going to support them as part of that project as well.
That's great. That's great, Adrian. Just there was an acknowledgement in the paper that Northern Ireland receives only around 1% of the UKRI funding, and I suppose we're far behind probably other areas within the UK. What steps is the department taking just to ensure that greater funding is given to the most deprived areas or sought for the most deprived areas in the region, and building the research capacity in those regions as well, which I think is really fundamental to it?
I'm really glad that you picked that point up, because that is my mantra at the moment. So if we look at this in real terms per head in terms of R&D investment, England gets around £140 per head per person. This is a 23-24 report that was done. If you look at Scotland, it's just around £101 per head. Wales is £53 per head, and Northern Ireland is £45 per head. We actually get around 0.9% of the budget, and it is absolutely part of the strategy. We've had discussions about this both with the PermSec and the head of the civil service, that we need to do more in this space. Now, we need to do more, and then we need to raise it. So I've raised it with Dame Angela when she came over. We've raised it over in Whitehall as well. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to ring fence, because we want to be competitive. So we have to try and find that right balance. So what there currently is at the moment, there's a system whereby if an application makes the grade, but UKRI just run out of funding, that there is a blue zone, and more often than not, Department for Economy will fund those blue zone projects. However, that is dependent on the amount of money that they have to do this. So I actually believe that we need to change this a bit, and we need to make sure that there is that fair share of the budget that comes our way, that we can put this into R&D. I know this is something that a lot of people feel that we haven't drawn down as much as we should have, and that there needs to be more representation. Now, part of that as well is making sure that we do have representation from Northern Ireland on the boards, on the various panels. So I've been working with the devolved administration, CSA and Wales and Scotland, and we are putting forward names to be represented from each of these regions on the industrial strategy panels. And we're very hopeful that Sir Ian Chapman, who has been, he chairs the Science and Innovation Devolved Administration group, that will be the case. Now, if that's not the case, I intend to essentially, for want of a better word, put this up the food chain to make sure that we are represented on these panels. Have you got anything else on that?
I mean, maybe just add, so I think this is a recognised challenge at UK government level. There has been a push within UKRI to find some different mechanisms. LIP is one example of that. Innovate UK, as one of the bodies within UKRI, have agreed an action plan with us, as they've been doing with other areas, to work with us to raise their profile, to encourage more applications to their funds, to drive up success levels from Northern Ireland. So I think, as you said, Helen, there's work ongoing to try and address that, but there's certainly more to do.
Yeah, no, there's definitely more to do. And one of the things as well is a lot of businesses here don't even realise that they're doing R&D. They actually are doing R&D, which is the acquisition of new knowledge, etc. And to help them with that, we've been working with NISRA whenever they go out for their business survey for R&D to actually say, look, this is what R&D actually is. If you're doing anything like this, please do let us know, because we want to be as inclusive as we can to get as many businesses as we can to be part of the ecosystem and to be part of working with our various sectoral leads and sectors and action plans that we put together.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely totally right. You know, lots of businesses are doing really, really powerful and innovative work, and yet they don't recognise it themselves that they are leading in that way. And I suppose more collaboration is really required in order for us to kind of up the ante in terms of innovation and research. And it's fundamental if we're going to be competitive. And those figures per head are quite startling. We have a long way to go in all of that. Okay, thank you very much. I'll let others in now.
Thank you, and thank you, Helen and team, for coming in this morning. A bit like Sinead, I was interested in the measurable outcomes and also interested in the region that I represent, the Southwest. What uptake have you had? It's, you know, into the clusters from the Southwest. It's that awareness piece that they're willing to go forward and be part of that process.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to move to Joanne on that one, because she looks like she knows the answer better than me. So
again, so Health and Life Sciences moves across a number of the companies who are engaged in the advanced manufacturing, the digitally enabled formulation, are outside kind of the corridor. So admittedly, Norbrook's not in the southwest, but there are a number of companies. So my organisation links with over 250 SMEs, and there are a number of SMEs within this space who are within the southwest region, and we ensure that they're connected in, and will ensure that they're connected in and they can engage. Often they're sort of made up of people that have moved back to the region and are really developing there. But yeah, I think Life and Health Sciences moves across the whole piece. When we're looking at future projects beyond the Local Innovation Partnership Fund for the Connected Health, there will be absolutely core partners, and we already have core partners there within those trusts areas as well. So that will be a core consideration, because it's exactly there with considering rural versus urban opportunities in connected health that they'll be connected.
Are you working with any spin-offs from the universities? Is it increasing spin-offs? You know, people
Absolutely, yes. And so they're and actually spin in. So that there's a company within Southwest, and I can't recall their name at this point, but they've actually sort of spun in. They've got people who've come back to start a company, and it's based down in Fermanagh. So
to hear. And Green technology, you know, Fermanagh is working towards recognising itself as green innovation, a district of green innovation with a number of programmes, Pace Plus funded programmes going there.
Yep.
Are you seeing interest there coming in to work
Yes.
in the innovation programme?
Particularly on supply chains and various aspects of that. What I would say is that one of the projects that's in this, they will be running green tech accelerators that are open to all companies across any region. I guess the challenge for us is to make sure that we advertise what we're doing and that it's out there. Obviously, it's quite an emerging technology. It's emerging sort of sector, if you like. The GVA from that sector isn't as high as other sectors, although do we accurately measure it? I don't know the answer to that, and that's probably something that we need to look at. I think there's a real opportunity here for. I've sort of said, Adrian, you're on digital, all things digital, Adrian, life and health sciences, Joanne. But there is a real opportunity for us to get these sort of leaders across each of these areas and to make sure that everybody is connected in and does know what's going on, and that where the real magic happens is across disciplines. So applying digital technologies to life and health sciences or applying green technologies to advanced manufacturing, that's where the magic happens. And with the sheer number of companies we have, that presents the opportunity for us, I think. So I wouldn't say we're there yet. I definitely think there's work to do on that. I don't know.
Is there a role for Invest NI? Are you working alongside them in terms of investment, inward investment?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting you say that. So Invest and I were around the LIP Innovation Panel, and we had a couple of really good projects that the panel unanimously decided wasn't where they needed to be, but there's more work to do. But Invest and I said to me afterwards, we need to do something about this because there's clearly an appetite here from large companies to get involved in this. So that's what we're going to do. We've literally just done the submission in the last week. We're catching our breath this week, and we're going to convene a group to say, how do we work up this project? As as a country, we need to be ready. We need to not be reactive. We need to be proactive in all of this. And we know the areas that the companies actually want to come in and what they're looking for. So we have to give them that offering.
I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. I mean, the big proposition for us is if we can align our ecosystem to accelerate ideas to market quicker than any other city of the UK, that becomes a huge attractive proposition for OEMs. So whether it's in medical devices, pharma, whether it's in manufacturing, whether it's in aerospace, attracting them to come and utilise the ecosystem here is paramount to what we're trying to do with the Local Innovation Partnerships Fund. And I would say in the grand scheme of sort of funding programmes through Innovate UK, it's quite small, so we see it as a starting block. That becomes the blueprint of how we do that integration of the ecosystem here, but then broader beyond that. So we're already starting to see it, for example, in the transport side with Northern Ireland Maritime and offshore. They're looking at ports beyond Belfast and Foyle and looking at how they can incorporate them in the same way as Helen has already said around green technologies beyond the corridor as well. But this programme was specifically designed for that programme by UK government, but we've used it as an opportunity to look at a blueprint beyond that.
And you've said, we've mentioned a couple of times, that the funding, 33 million, and it's a 5 to 7 year project. And you talk about looking forward, so what do you anticipate as being the follow-on from that? At what stage is that? Do you start working on that?
That very much depends. Obviously, UKRI have gone through this transition period and they've now got their various buckets of funding. We see this as proof of principle that we can do this, and therefore we can leverage more funds in this space of much higher quantums than what we currently have. For example, one of the primary concerns that I think we should have as a country is we are about to run out of high performance compute capability between both universities, and that is a big problem if we want to use our data to help drive the innovations that we need to do across numerous large companies. And even talking about that with people and putting it on their radar makes them understand that this is now what we need to do next. So what we want to do next is we want to work up, the next 5 to 10 big projects that we need to do, and then we'll be looking to various politicians to help us unlock the funds for that. But this is what we need to do as a whole region to make this happen.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Padraig.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for your presentation. I suppose just to touch on points that have been made by a few other members and maybe go into more depth on them. So the first one for me was around the impact and the benefit for local businesses. I'm conscious when we talk about research and development, there's usually about 10 companies which take up a huge chunk of that budget. And what I'm keen to understand is you've talked about startups and about other businesses who can link in and benefit from this. I'm keen to understand, I suppose, the benefit for those businesses which are maybe untapped at the minute. Those businesses that are obviously predominantly family-owned businesses here in the north, the SMEs, over 93% of our businesses. How do those people who have never accessed any of this R&D funding, who maybe don't feel comfortable with AI development, how do they access this, and what's the benefit for them?
Okay, so in terms of all of the associated businesses and supply chains for these projects will be coming from the region. That's the first thing, that's a given. The second thing is, I hear what you're saying about the R&D point, and you make the point as well about how do they even know where to start with AI. Everybody here will be very familiar with the Artificial Intelligence Collaboration Centre. Supply is vastly the demand is vastly outstripping supply in this instance, and there's a lot of companies, they have sites up in the northwest, and there's a lot of companies that are using this, not necessarily for massive agentic AI type projects, but just how do they streamline their internal business processes. And I think the model that AICC has created is really, really good in this particular space, but there is a need to absolutely accelerate this and make this bigger, because it is the go-to for all of those young businesses. To your point on how do businesses even start to access this, Innovate UK are very keen to reach out. We have a devolved administration lead from Innovate UK over here, and so they are keen to reach out to all of the businesses, and they're trying to do that through Invest NI. They're docked into Invest NI, and so I think it's got to be a targeted communication campaign on what is R&D and how does this apply to you, which is why I've tried to write out, along with the NISRA business survey, to let them know that this is what R&D actually is. But your point is very well made, and I think that is something that we have to ensure that we help to communicate this. This is part of a larger strategic plan, though, I think, in terms of making sure that our sectors have got those sectoral leads that go out and sort of do this work, and I think that would be incredibly important to do. Do you want to come in, Adrian?
Yeah. Porrick, just your point's really well made, and actually through the workshops when we were designing out some of the programs, we brought in some small businesses to that, and that's why in the projects there's accelerator programs built into the actual projects themselves, so that gives accessibility. So we broadened out beyond the large companies actually in the projects to that long tail of SMEs, small startups, small businesses. And in fact, on the energy systems side, there was a request, what about the businesses who aren't in the energy systems sector at this moment in time? Could they transition into that? So these frontier sectors, could we support small family businesses who may be in foundational economy type activity progress into something else, into frontier technology type sectors? And that's one of the things that has been built into some of these programs. And just on another point, I think this is where the city and growth deals become really important, and the alignment of city and growth deals behind these similar interventions as well. So in my role as Innovation Commissioner, I can only speak for Belfast and the Belfast Region City deal. What we're looking at is aligning some of our funding around R&D activity programs for small businesses to access the Centres of Excellence capabilities, which again feeds into the LIP ecosystem. So we have thought about how we start to align some of those fundings across UKRI, local innovation partnerships, Belfast Region City deal investments. But I think that's where city and growth deals become really important at preparing those businesses to access this type of program that we're talking about.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it is, that strategic alignment piece is obviously the key to creating the impact for this and the ongoing impact beyond this level of funding as well. So look, I'm really glad to hear that, and suppose I'd be keen to understand, as an economy committee coming out of this, what can we do to support that happening, to actually make sure, as you have mentioned, that businesses recognise that they're all able, in theory, to access this, because a lot of the businesses that I would speak to when you talk about AI, there's kind of the sense of, well, I'm not involved in tech, or I'm not involved in this, so it doesn't impact me. Where your conversation, I think, has been really useful in framing the fact that this is accessible to everyone and has a potential impact and opportunities for everyone. So going out of this today, what actions can we take to actually make that conversation happen?
Just encourage businesses you're talking to get in touch. So there's a little bit of information on the NI Business Info website around the whole LIPF process, and then I think once we get the thumbs up, fingers crossed, from UKRI for the projects, there will be companies and organisations facilitating those projects who can be a kind of a touch point for businesses who are keen to be involved or explore what role that they can play. I particularly think that cluster organisations such as Serani or Nemo maybe will probably be the key route.
And the green one as well. I mean, I think there's a theme with yourself and with others to make sure that, in effect, in the business community, we widen this out as broadly as we possibly can. What I would say is what we're trying to do here is that we're trying to give the opportunity through this new way of working to all. So it's not the usual sort of, oh, you're a friend of a friend and there's an opportunity and you put this in. We opened this out to everybody to see what would come back, and then we worked extensively with them. Is there enough for what we need to do? No. But can we use this as evidence to say, here's why you need to give us more, and this is what we're going to do with it. So from this is where I'm working at more at a strategic perspective. This is where I see this being the catalyst for more to help the companies that you're talking about in the various areas.
Just two more questions from myself, I suppose, around the measurements for this and how we get out. So obviously this has been discussed before, but productivity is obviously one of the key pillars of the Minister's economic vision. So in terms of this, productivity of the businesses you've mentioned is obviously particularly high and drives productivity growth. But how are you going to measure that? And I suppose, how are you going to capture the data to ensure that this has been as beneficial as possible, and not only captured, I suppose, at project close, but at key steps throughout and key intervals through?
So in one of my other roles, I sit on the transformation board more broadly for some very large transformative projects. And my role really on that board is to make sure that you have a dashboard that accurately articulates what's the problem, what are you trying to solve, and why, and what are your KPIs that you're going to measure in real time using data, and then what are you going to have at the back end of it, and how are you going to use that going forward and track this. I would like to see similar dashboards for each of these three projects, that basically before you start any project, before you start any new transformation of anything, you need to baseline where's your starting point. So we need a baseline of where we're at across each of these projects, and then we need to map and track what the success looked like. That could be, it has to be a return on investment, 2 to 1, 3 to 1 minimum. It has to be the number of other stakeholders that you're engaging with. It has to be the number of jobs. It has to be the number of companies that you're is there FDI that you attract in on the back of this? Do some of these end up being used as, if you like, various hotels that other companies can come in and use? What's your social metrics on this as well? So how many lives do you impact in this way? What does it look like? And I think if obviously I'm not an economist, as I'm sure you're very well aware, so docking in with the economy team to work out what metrics do you need in addition to what we think we need to show that we are giving a good return for what we get. Quite frankly, what we achieve as a country as a whole with not sufficient R&D investment is incredible, but we need to do more. We've identified, we had a workshop with DCIT and others, and we identified that we have a massive missing middle here in Northern Ireland. So we're very good at spinning out our companies, and we have a few that are really good in life and health sciences, and advanced manufacturing is really good, etc. But that missing middle bit and the investment for missing middle, that's what's missing. So that is also one of the projects that we're looking to see how do we work that up as well.
Okay. Maybe just add, there's a kind of logic model that UKRI have, which sets out the kind of objectives, outputs, and then sort of short-term outcomes and longer-term outcomes that framed in broad terms, how we expect the impact to come, and then part of what UKRI will be doing will be looking at that detail in the projects and measures that they've put forward, which are quite detailed measures around sort of GVA per job and those kind of things, which will give you a sense of how they will drive up productivity within those clusters and industries. So there's quite a bit of detail in individual projects.
And I'm assuming that's going to be uniform across all 3 projects.
Yes.
Obviously, they're different, but okay.
Yeah, there'll be some differences.
Well, there'll be differences in terms of what's the problem statement and what are you trying to do, but the measurements will be the same, and there will be regional variation, you know, because of what we need and what we need to measure here. So I think there will be additionality in what we need to measure.
Okay, perfect. No, looking forward to seeing that develop. And I suppose just the last point for me was on the point around the 1%. It's so low, and it doesn't obviously allow us to have the impact, as you've mentioned, that we would like. And just on Declan's point, it is, when you compare it with the potential R&D growth, particularly in the south, and the investment in the south, it's staggering. Actually, when you look at this, there's, I think, an 100-fold increase in the south by 2035 compared to what we're looking at here. I mean, that is just shocking, and it does make the case again for more of these clusters and more of this work, and to be on an all-Ireland basis, particularly if we're trying to tackle regional balance in areas like my own and Derry and all those border communities. That's where we're going to see the real impact, is on those clusters. I know you've mentioned a lot of the work you're already doing around that, so it's more a point, I suppose, than a question. But I do think that it allows us, when we are being critically underfunded by the British government time and time again, to actually look at an innovative and a different solution to how we work on an all-Ireland basis. But look, it's really interesting. I'm looking to see how these projects progress and being a part of those going forward. So thanks very much for your work, and we're looking forward to hearing from you again.
Thank you.
David?
Thank you, Helen. It's actually really refreshing to sit in committee and hear passionately telling us about innovation and trying to move this place forward. But one of the real concerns, and this is just trying to tease us out, whenever I read through, we're 12th of the 12 regions of the UK. So we're last. We're getting 1% of the UK budget, where we're 3% of the population, so we're getting a third of the money. But we also have access to some of the South money through Intertrade Ireland and through, I know there's a dedicated fund there, is massive. So we have actually access to 2. I cannot understand how we're 12th out of 12. We only get 1% of the UK money, yet we have access. Where's the barriers that are in place that are preventing the scale and the growing of innovation here?
I mean, some of the feedback from the universities we've discussed this is around actually the challenges of being in Northern Ireland, maybe not having large companies. So a lot of the kind of research pots that are made available, you need a big private sector partner to come in with co-funding. There's maybe less of those in Northern Ireland than there are in some regions. Again, maybe that kind of geographical separation can mean there's not the kind of links with other universities and things that create partners there, so that there are just some kind of structural barriers that can be a bit of a challenge. But I think if we absolutely knew what all of the underpinning issues were, we would maybe have made a bit more progress in addressing them. But
can I just add to that? So there's good mechanisms for higher education to work north-south. There's really good mechanisms through Intertrade for companies that have already got products on the market. Where we're lacking is an innovation infrastructure, which is companies who are accelerating to market, because they, particularly in the life and health sciences, they may need to manufacture something in order to put it into a clinical trial. or test it with patients. They cannot work through some of the funding mechanisms with UK government with somebody across the border. They have to work across the Irish Sea back with the UK, and obviously there are then relationship barriers that we face there. So thinking through, alongside the higher education opportunities and the currently trading businesses, how we can develop an innovation framework that helps us develop that north-south. We've been doing some work there, but funding is limited there. That means that companies will be able to work in the innovation space, because currently, if they are more than 50% grant funded, a company cannot access Intertrade Ireland funds. So I think there is a funding gap there, and I think that the committee's support in working north-south to develop what that might look like, perhaps a north-south competition to support those companies working together, I think will really accelerate the process.
Just from a strategic level, we don't ring fence R&D. That's fundamentally, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
And that's what needs to happen if we really want to change things.
Yes, there's no prioritisation of research and development.
No.
Full stop. And that comes directly from the department.
Well, it comes in the R&D's part of the Barnett formula that comes down in sort of.
So why are we'll take it in two bits. Actually, picking up on Philip's point, there's no overall strategy here to actually develop. So we've got a shotgun approach. Everything is like little bits all over the place. So how would a small business know where to go to get funding when there's 5 or 6?
There is a research and innovation strategy that's going out for consultation, and we talk about all of this. And one of our pillars is on innovation-driven enterprises, small companies that are looking to access R&D. How do we get our sectors and get sectoral leads who actually have got these actual. They're accountable. It's an actual job that you're accountable for, to make sure that you go out and you tell your sector exactly what's going on. How do we make sure that we bring in more R&D from the south and from essentially the UK as well? How do we ensure that we have representation on all the panels that we can possibly have? Because right now the figures are quite scary when it comes to Northern Ireland and where we're sitting at. So there is a wider strategic plan for this. We need to. Again, I'll probably get into trouble, but I get into trouble all the time anyway.
So that too, so don't worry.
So having that nexus there of a research NI, that place of everybody knows where they need to go to and what we need to do. Joanne was able to secure some local MFA funding from Innovate. It was a very small pot. Yeah. How many applications did you have for that?
Yeah, so we had £7.5 million, and we've had over 200 applications for that. And the pass mark for funding was 70%, but actually to get funding in Northern Ireland, because we used the pot up, it was 86.1%. But what has actually happened is that Invest Northern Ireland has then picked up those blue zone projects. Yeah. But again, that's local money that then funds that R&D rather than.
So this is a problem for everybody. So it is that we need to get this right.
Yeah. Listen to everything you said. When you look at the south of whatever 3.6 billion or whatever it is, the budget for innovation, but they've a one-stop place. Mm-hmm. So we've talked through about our smaller businesses. We don't have the bigger, larger companies, so smaller numbers going for this. But a small business, how does a small business access any of that support, or if there isn't a front door, one front door for them to walk through?
Invest in I.
So all of this is so this should all be pointed at Invest in I.
Invest in I will, so they have their own R&D programs that they fund.
Okay.
So, but if they're not able to support whatever that company is looking for, they will know about the other support mechanisms, the other funds. They will either be able to provide support themselves or signpost on.
But what's really good is that working with Invest in I on this, they're very clear that if we have a more joined up approach in this, we'll be able to leverage more.
That's the key.
And be able to do more working together than working individually. And that's what's been really good about coming out of this.
Yeah, so it's Invest in I then are the key then.
Yeah.
To this, and then really the strategy and everything needs to come from there, or. Yeah, again, it's all over the place. Everything's all over the place.
I mean, Helen's been working on an R&I strategy, which I think will provide a useful framework for us going forward. I mean, just the financial position is a very challenging one overall.
Yeah.
It's capital funding that we're talking about here. So obviously the Department for Economy is making the case for investing in R&D versus investing in roads or hospitals or schools, whatever it might be. So those are the really difficult choices that the executive as a whole faces.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Helen. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Panel, again, sorry I had to leave for part of it, so some of it may overlap, but from what I have heard, I'm extremely impressed by the seriousness in which you guys have undertaken this job and the focus on R&D. Quite often when we have conversations with businesses about R&D, they highlight its difficulty in accessing. They would also largely have viewed it through the lens of tax rather than innovation and development, which ultimately will lead to growth. So whilst the particular Local Innovation Partnership Fund in the scheme of things is a relatively small pot of money whenever we're looking at some of these sectors and what's required, it is so important to try to look at what the scaffolding looks like for future models. And that's what I sense is happening here. Just a quick question on the innovation panel. Is its job purely to adjudicate on applications, or is it involved in the wider research and innovation strategy?
Okay, again, a very good question. So the wider research and innovation strategy was written last summer, I believe, and in order to put that strategy together, we went out and got a call for evidence, and we got 720 respondents to help inform that strategy. So that strategy is not based on anything other than data and evidence, which I think is how most strategies should be. So in terms of the innovation panel were the ones that made the decision and endorsed the projects to go forward to be worked up. And then endorsed the final submission of the portfolio. However, myself and the cluster leads and the secretariat, we did a lot of work in co-creation of the projects and bringing stakeholders together that wouldn't normally work together, and I think that's really important. I can't say too much about the projects, but a fantastic moment for me was two people were putting together one of the projects, and you could see their eyes light up when they realised you can do Internet of Things with this, you can do digital twinning with this, and these stakeholders would never have come together to. So we facilitated 5 workshops, which were full afternoon workshops with each of the areas, the projects. I know you had numerous individual meetings with them, and we brought together people that wouldn't normally work together. And it was very labour intensive, but we're trying to drive a cultural shift in how we do things. And we as in the 3 of us, gave individual feedback to each of the projects that was general and also a full list of specific feedback that was wasn't sugar-coated. But it was, this is what we need to do in order to move forward to the next stage. And the projects that went forward really took on that feedback, and you could really see full integration between digital twin and cyber AI as the core technologies that are running through each of these projects.
In relation to the innovation panel, you did mention at the start that there was industry representation on that panel. How many of the 13 was industry related, and are you at liberty to say what particular industries those were?
So we had the Chambers of Commerce, Suzanne Wiley represented, and then I think there were 2 or 3 members from Matrix.
We had Richard Kennedy from Almac as well.
Yes, he was one of the Matrix.
Because depending on what EOIs came through, we brought in the relevant industry members to try to help with the decision-making process. As a chair, how do you know that your innovation panel is functioning correctly, and that you have, that you have chaired this in a way that is entirely fair and appropriate? Is whenever the chair doesn't actually have to make a decision.
Yeah, it's made for them.
The panel makes the decision, and the panel were unanimous across each of the projects.
So, in relation to, you've mentioned percentages in relation to how much UK research and innovation Northern Ireland gets vis-a-vis the rest of the UK. David has said it's the lowest of all regions. That's a concern. I don't think it would be fair of us to look, in an ideal world, absolutely you would ring fence R&D funding, but in the financial climate that we're in, and particular stretches on education and health, it is difficult, albeit some of these projects could lead to further efficiencies in those systems, which could also have a knock-on impact. In terms of raw financial figures, 1% is worth how much to that we're spending at the moment on UK research and innovation in Northern Ireland?
It's about 87 million.
Okay. And what would be required to be compatible with the other regions in terms of a level playing field?
So obviously about threefold.
Okay, threefold. That's fair enough.
Although England does take proportionally more, and then Scotland takes more, it is actually Wales and Northern Ireland that are the ones that need
threefold increase would be required to level up. Finally, from me, and it goes back to the basis of where we're going to go with all of this. And Philip has mentioned to start all of these different, whether it's growth deals, innovation centres, all doing different things, and how this is hopefully going to be a way of funneling it all into a strategic overpiece. When we talk to business and their difficulties and their need and wants to access R&D for growth purposes, it is a very difficult and complicated system. We have to get our heads around it, never mind business. And with the greatest respect, Mark, and I know what you said about it is for Invest NI, I don't think we can leave it all at Invest NI's door. And I think you touched on this, Helen. If you've watched even what's happening in other sectors, we're going through a period of transformation on many different sectors. I look recently at the Department for Education and this Transform Education piece, and regardless of what your views are on that, their ability now to reach to their stakeholders, which is their teachers, through conferences, through workshops, to explain the nuts and bolts of what it actually is they're trying to achieve, is really being received well. I think what needs to happen is there needs to be a bottom-up approach. There needs to be an effort from the department and those professionals working in this field. And you will be surprised, you will not have a lack of people coming forward to want to get information, but you need to take them through it step by step on how they can access R&D. Every elected representative around this table, when it comes to the community sector, we see every single week groups that come in that want to access funding. The biggest barrier is lack of knowledge and capacity. Now, quite often we have to do those applications for them to build capacity, but the people that are accessing it are normally those that are better organised and better funded. We see that replicated in this particular industry. So my takeaway ask, and I sense it's there, but I think it needs to be crystallised, that when a research and innovation strategy is fully fleshed out, fully in the public, that we have industry people that understand it, that people can communicate it to the sector, and that's the small and medium-sized enterprise that wants R&D funding, that don't know how, that think it's complex, that thinks it's tax related, and therefore it sometimes is restrictive in what they can do, to really capture as many as possible to ensure that they can experience the growth potential that's associated with R&D.
I completely agree. It shouldn't be about who you know. It should be open and available to everybody. And in addition to that, I've also said there needs to be a one-stop shop. Ideally, you have your sectoral leads located in Invest NI or wherever, and essentially what they do is they help with grant writing workshops, things like that, because that is a big problem. People don't know how to do this.
100%.
So that was one of the very first things that I called out that needed to happen, was we need to provide that, if you like, one-stop shop. You go in, you find out about how do you access the dual markets, you find out what are the regulatory requirements that you need, you find out what grant funding is available to you, and you get support to take you through that. I mean, we have supported the projects through this process and helped them co-create and give them tips and advice, and that's what we need to do in a much large with scalability. Yes,
100%. I think we're on the same page. I just want to make sure that it happens. I want to see a stage whereby the department Invest and those involved are literally holding roadshows that are filled to their max capacity with businesses who want to access R&D, don't know how. This is how you're going to do it, and we're going to guide you through the process.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, colleagues, can I on behalf of the committee thank our guests very much for that. It's greatly appreciated. Before we move on to our next session, our members' content, we just go into recess here.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Helen, can I get...
Committee Room 30, signed. 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 Committee Room 30, sound. Committee Room 30, sound. Committee Room 30, sound. Committee Room 30, sound. Committee Room 30, sound.
Okay, colleagues, we'll now move to item number 7, which is the AI strategy for the public sector, and thankfully the CSTA has stayed with us, so I'll hand over to Professor McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Chair, and delighted to still be here. The artificial intelligence strategy, it's entitled Positive Use, Positive Inclusions and Positive Outcomes, and the reason for that is with anything that we use, you can use things for good or you can use things for bad. If you choose to use them for good, then you will get positive inclusion and you will get positive outcomes. The strategy has got what we call foundational tenets that underpin the strategy. And I think this is really important to understand where we're coming from with this. AI is not a replacement for human intelligence, first and foremost. This is a very human-centred strategy. It does not replace humans, it adds value to the work that humans do. It supports human decision making, so it does not render human decision making obsolete. So humans in the loop at all times. And essentially, programmers and designers may design the levels of autonomy on AI systems, but it's up to the people to decide exactly how much of this will be used. And so, in the scope of the AI strategy, essentially it was drafted in the end of November, and in order to get to that drafting stage, I think I spoke to the committee in September and I told you about the stakeholder engagement we had to that time point. It then went out to each of the departments and the permanent secretaries fed into the strategy in December and January. Those comments were fed back into the strategy. It also went to our external AI advisory panel. And I think one of the things that I would like to point out is that many AI strategies sit in isolation. So they sit in a frame where this is the AI strategy for the country and off we go. What we've really focused on doing is making sure that the recommendations from Matrix are in the strategy, that in addition to that, some of the really important ongoing pieces of work, the digital workplace work are in the strategy, who's doing what in digital is worked out. So there's a lot of interdependencies which are really important that are already underway. The strategy has, we've done all of the equality and diversity for the strategy, we've done all the paperwork to go out for consultation. And the strategy went to FM's office on the 17th of April to be approved to go out for consultation, and I'm happy to report it is now being approved to go out for consultation. So that means that we will be getting this out in the next week. What I would say is that there are a number of actions that are well underway because it is a very integrated way of working. I'll not say more than that because I'm sure you probably have plenty of questions you'd like to have.
Perfect. So thank you, Helen. So I suppose the biggest update then from what has been given to us so far is the strategy has now been approved by First and Deputy First Minister. It's no mean feat getting the approval of a joint office.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Congratulations on doing that, and probably a record turnaround in terms of something going into the executive office and within a month it's came back out again. So it must be good. So I just want to check that in relation to the strategy itself, so it'll go out to public consultation
8 weeks.
8-week public consultation.
Yes.
Strategy is then, so I suppose the key then is once the strategy is approved by the public, it's done by ministers, is there like a delivery strategy / action plan as part of that? Or?
Yes, so each of the, so when we look at the strategy, the first thing that I'd like to say is we start off with outlining the AI landscape in Northern Ireland. And again, this feeds into the previous conversation we had about R&D. It is critical that we tell people what we have and how good we are in various areas. We can't be good at everything, but the things we are good at, we need to tell people. So, for example, if you think of businesses, AICC offers businesses 23 hours to help them to start to do AI 101, etc. That will then move on to the next phase, and we've got the suite of regional city deals that are happy to help any business that wants to come and work with them to do R&D or to learn how do they use AI to develop their technologies, or not necessarily technologies, where could AI help them in their business. It's important we tell the world that this is what we've got and that we are actually integrated in our ways of thinking. For having only 2, research active universities, we have over 160 academics in AI, and we've got over 500 outputs. In addition, you will be aware that I put in departmental science champions into each department, and I asked them to produce areas of research interest for each department. We have 87 areas of research interest. Over 75 of them are using AI and technologies with AI. But we need to make sure that there's a framework in place so that the use of this essentially meets our expectations for what we want with our citizens, and we keep the human in the loop, and I think that's really important. So we've got the AI landscape where we talk about what we have, and then we tell the world about the building blocks, and then we talk about our principles. So we have an additional principle that no other country in the UK or Ireland has, and one of our core principles is training and literacy. We've added in training and literacy because we're advocating across the public sector for every new AI project that is undertaken that you're training somebody up while you're doing this, because such is our challenge to get people feeling even confident using some of the quite sort of easier tools to use. There's not a lot of confidence out there, so we need to do a piece of work around training and literacy. Across each of those 8 principles, we have a number of actions. So and I don't have time, I don't think, to go through them all. Yeah, sure. But let's take principle 1, human oversight. We need to have a human oversight team across each department that is aware of all the AI projects that are ongoing within that department, and that makes sure that the quality of data going in meets the threshold required, but also has checks in place to make sure there's no redress, there is redress, there's opportunity for redress, but also make sure there's no bias. So what I mean by this is, if you use, let's say, for example, an AI tool to help you with something, and you don't check whether that AI tool starts to learn what the user wants and starts to have bias, then that could cause you a lot of issues. Of course. So that is why we need to have human oversight teams, and that is what myself, the external experts, have very much been involved in. You may, I know that you know everything about AICC, and one of the things that they've produced is the CAGE tool. That CAGE tool, we're advocating this, this is in the strategy, and that projects or providers that provide AI solutions for government show how their project ranks in this CAGE tool across a number of different areas. We are also, and you may have questions about what are we going to do first in all of this in the Office of AI. We have a couple of core functions that we're going to do. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to have an AI registry of all the ongoing projects. We need to be open and transparent about what we're doing. The second thing that we're going to do is we're going to have a central AI resource. And what I mean by that is almost like a garage, a docking in of high-level AI engineers that departments can dock into and basically be seconded in a hub-and-spoke model to learn how to do things in that way. And essentially, we're also going to be involved in telling the citizens in a citizens forum about what's going on and how is it working and what is it we're doing. You can't measure, if you don't measure the pitfalls and the successes of things, then you don't know whether something's truly working or not. So that's something that we're very much going to be involved in. In terms of the departments, most of the actions in the strategy are for departments and public sector bodies. We cover off actions in data governance, technical safety, fairness and transparency. We've combined the two principles of fairness and transparency because I don't believe that you can actually be fair without being transparent. People can accept difficult decisions, but not if you're not transparent about that. We have environmental sustainability. You'll know better than any department, where we're at with energy and how do we do this in a responsible way. We have societal benefit, which is really important. Do we even need to use AI for a solution or not? And again, that's a question that we're encouraging people to think of. And training and literacy, again, provide training to public sector staff, develop AI-specific career pathways, which is very important, and integrate trainees into every human oversight team so they learn about the different facets of that team.
In terms of the Department for the Economy then, where do you see, internally the benefits of an AI strategy where that could work? So, one of my frustrations, and it's not the fault of dedication of staff, but a letter that we have later, it shows the vacancy rate within the department, but production of consultation documents, strategies from the department, we're told that, for example, the aviation strategy was a year delayed. Okay, when it came after a year, I'm pretty sure I could have written it very quickly, and AI probably could have written it even quicker. So I'm just wondering, is there any thoughts in terms of Department for the Economy specific, how we can free up people who might be in back office roles to be able to deliver on frontline services and ministerial priorities due to the resource constraints that the department's under, or is there any specific views within the Department for the Economy how AI can assist them?
So what I would say is I've also set up a government AI network, and I have a Department for Economy champion on that network.
Yes.
And from going to a place of really very low uptake in the core technology of obviously Copilot, but not just Copilot, digital skills, and you'll know that the Permanent Secretary is leading on digital skills as well. From going from that position, I think they have over 50% now of their staff have taken up Copilot and are using it, which is a good start. I know that they're very engaged, but part of the challenge is identifying what can you use. Now also you have to be smart about this. So let's think about if you look at use case tools, one of the things that we'd like to do across the government AI network is one of the first lighthouse cases that we are developing with the Strategic Investment Board is a tool for business cases. We are, we don't estimate correctly how much things will cost. So therefore, when you look at the audit reports, things run hugely over budget. On a £35 million project, every day delay costs £1,000. So there's broad consensus that a tool like this could be used across all departments. So why develop one of those tools in each of the departments? So we're trying to develop a series of tools that could be used across all departments with broad buy-in, and I think that's really important. Now, what's really nice about SIB have done the alpha phase of this, and we're putting together a bid to the transformation board for the beta phase of this, because we feel that the return on investment in terms of time and money saved will be well worth it. And it's not making any decision about whether to do the business or not. What it's doing is those that are writing the business cases, it's telling them, have you thought of this, and this, and these are the areas you need to think of. And those reviewing the business cases, it's going to tell them, okay, here's the areas that you really need to focus in on to try to make us a little bit more efficient in that space. There was broad agreement across all departments that this was definitely a very good use case for the first one. And what we've asked the departments to do is go away and think of what are you currently doing that could be applied then across other departments. So we even think of some of the image AI that they're using in health, how could we use those across other departments?
Yeah.
The other thing that we're not me. In fact, I have nothing to do with it. But Department of Finance are running point essentially on a digital workplace. And what we mean by that is getting our record management into a state across all departments that it becomes accessible to an AI tool. There's no point doing this department by department. We need to do this as a collective across the top. So whenever people think, okay, well, where's the AI strategy? These interconnectors have been ongoing.
Yes.
You will be aware that your permanent secretary leads on digital, but you'll be aware that one of his deputies is running point with HR on essentially the people strategy and digital skills in the people strategy. We make sure that we're on that, and we're saying, okay, this level of training for AI, we need to make sure that the staff get qualifications in that. So we need to do a top-down where we need to train our leaders in this, but we need to do a bottom-up approach where we make sure that we train our staff.
Perfect. Okay, David.
Thank you, Helen, so much. Kate is obviously messaging me. She's ill, and apologies she's not here. This is her kind of subject that she's absolutely passionate about, so she's got it. She's not here, Helen, so you're stuck with me. But I sit in the PAC as well. I declared an interest earlier, and this is what you're just talking about is one of the things that we've been looking at with IT systems. So we're looking right across the board. So where does that sit? If you look at Scotland, for example, there's one point of contact within there. It's an overall government. Mm-hmm. So you don't have each department. Whereas here we've got every department kind of autonomous on their own. Mm-hmm. So how do we ensure that we're able to learn from the kind of Scottish model, or the South actually have done the same, of making sure that there's one point that we're not have every department running doing their own thing?
So what we have found that has worked, it's more mature than the government AI network, but we also have got a departmental science champion network, the R&D network. And what we found is by working with those departmental science champions and saying, what are you doing? What's your best practice? Having our channels and our communications with all of that has really shared the envelope of what needs to be done. The government AI network is very much in the place of, it doesn't, when it meets, people want solutions to the issues. Now, I take your point, where do you come to? Yeah. In an ideal world, you come to the Office of AI, but the Office of AI is essentially just getting built out at the moment. And, we're very pleased that we have a project manager that's coming in from DCIT to help us with this, which is quite exciting from our perspective. Yeah. But we're not doing the work. The departments will be doing the work in all of this. And I think that's really important. What we want to do is make sure that we streamline the tools that can be used across departments and make sure that we share best practice. And
this is where I suppose it gets a little bit confused. We're looking at the IT systems there, and if you look at Department of Finance, this would sit under, but the digital sits under economy, and then this is under the executive office. So where that office, where will that sit? Will that sit under the executive office? Is that the? It will sit under the executive office, but So what's really nice is that the head of the civil services brought me into the PermSec forum on a Friday to attend. So that's really good from a perspective of being able to share where we're at, docking in with the other permanent secretaries and making sure that we're all aware. We had a session there where we worked out, well, how does digital work? Where does digital need to sit? There was a digital maturity assessment. There's actions coming out of that. My job is to, I guess, make sure that we do those central things and we do them really well. The Government AI Network have said it would be really good to have a really strong framework as to what we need to do around this, and we can take on some of those actions. But it is also, it's up to the departments as well, though, to action some of these, and most of the actions sit with the departments. All we're doing is providing that sort of oversight, and if people do contact us, we will put them in contact with the departmental AI champions. It's that oversight and the framework that's absolutely essential. It is, and that's what we're trying to do. That is, it's absolutely key. At the end of the day, the public just need want better, more productivity from our civil service. So this will help right across. And
the only way you're going to get that though is if you measure in your projects what the outputs are. So that's what we're very keen on driving forward, is that, you know, again, what's your problem? What are you measuring? What's your solution? You know, and what does success look like? We have to if we're going to undertake a project, we need to know what is it we're trying to achieve. And I think we need to also understand, and I think this is where this will help with citizens' confidence, sometimes things may not go according to plan. That's okay to tell people. Like, we shouldn't be afraid to tell people these things.
Actually make it worse if you don't.
That's exactly.
Yeah. So listen, thank you very much. Thank you.
Diana?
I think again, I think some of the questions I was going to ask have been raised, Helen, and I just think, you know, there's a public perception that efficiencies are needed and speed of information and consultations, and should AI deliver, and it has potential to deliver, obviously, from flexibility and speed, or to overcome administrative functions. So how can AI identify more efficiencies? The cohort who carry out the administrative functions, what will their role become? Can they move into the next sphere? Is there staff development there that AI can anticipate?
So that's kind of the discussions that are ongoing in essentially that group I was telling you that are working on how do we train up our civil servants. So the people strategy and the digital pillar of that people strategy, it's not just AI, it's digital as well, and that there needs to be an AI specific digital specific career pathway so people can move on. And you know, the administrative tasks, while vitally important, the more streamlining we do of those, the better use we can make of people's skills to actually help to make the decisions that we need them to make. Now, at that same time, as you move up through the ecosystem, you also need to get your data sorted. So I know that NISRA are working on a data strategy there, and we have to be very, very careful that we have our data stored in a format that is entirely appropriate and that it meets all the quality thresholds. So we've got to get our data sorted. We have to get our people sorted, but I think the really nice thing is we have got integration. So some of the things that you'll read about in the strategy, you'll see about data, you'll also see about people, you'll also see about some of the recommendations of Matrix. They're already starting to be underway. We're starting to do all of that. So from that perspective, I think we are quite integrated compared to some other regions, maybe where the AI sits out on its own and it's not integrated across the piece.
Yeah, and you mentioned statistics, and it's a bit of a bugbear that NISRA, their statistics can be out of date, and we can see where AI has potential to capture those statistics, which really drive the business decisions and the business cases. Can you see that really happening more quickly?
I can see that happening more quickly. I can certainly see consultations happening much more quickly because that is relatively uncontroversial. I mean, we could be getting data through really quickly. I think we need to change legislation to do some of this, and I know that this is something that Philip and the team are working really hard on. And again, we may not, obviously, like, we're a very small team, but we're docked in. We're part of the conversation there. We're part of the conversation with Matrix. We're part of the conversation, you know, in various facets. And I think that's really important. So there is consistent messaging, not only from ourselves, but also from the stakeholders who are going, well, actually, we think we should do it like this. Okay, tell me why. I think challenge is healthy if it's done in a really positive way.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Declan.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks again, Helen. I noticed in the papers reference to pioneering work being carried out in Estonia in relation to the application of AI to improving public service delivery, efficiency and government. So to what extent has the strategy been informed by the experience in other jurisdictions such as Estonia in the 26 counties, and the extent to which there is a conversation with Wales and Scotland and those specific jurisdictions, which I assume are developing their own pathway.
So yes, you're absolutely right. So you'll obviously be aware that I operate in the world of soft power because I don't necessarily have a massive team that are working on this at present. This is where my external advisory group have been instrumental in this. So we had academics, we had Adrian, who you saw there. We also had AICC round the table, and we had the AI leads from the Big Four, which I think were really important because they have docked into all of these different strategies. It's very interesting. The strategy in the South was very interesting, how they constructed that and put that together, in terms of it was very much about where they are at right now and what they need to do. We have adopted an approach that is specific for our region, and it's place-based, and it's very proud to be place-based. When you look at the UK strategy, it is very it's very innovation focused, and given our economy and given how important our citizens are and the people, we are specifically very people focused in what we're trying to do, because we want to make sure that people are the ones that make the decisions in this strategy across the public sector. So we're not apologising for that. That is the feedback that we've got. That is where we're at as a country, and I do not believe that we will get to a point anytime soon where decisions will be made for us. That is not where we're going with this. We're going on the resources we have, the ecosystem we have. So to answer your question, I would say obviously we've taken on board where Scotland's at. Wales have produced theirs. We've taken on board the Irish one, the Estonia one. But actually the main drivers in this are our local people. It's not other countries. We see what they're doing and we see how they've structured it and we see what their principles are, but not all of those principles apply to what we are trying to do. We see that AICC have done a brilliant job on the Cage tool. We've seen this demoed. The Cage tool's being used in our first Lighthouse project on business cases. That's what we're going to go with on this. So we've taken on feedback from people strategy, matrix, digital maturity assessment, all the key pieces of information that we could to get it right for here.
There were 3 or 4 problems or challenges identified by the matrix report.
Mm-hmm.
So one of them related to the post-Brexit regulatory uncertainty. Mm-hmm. So the question's twofold. First of all, what does that mean? And secondly, has that been addressed in the strategy?
Okay, so this is a strategy for the public sector, mm-hmm. so this is not a strategy for businesses. Mm-hmm. That said, the framework could be used for businesses. Obviously, a lot of the businesses in Northern Ireland will be related, will want to come under the EU framework for all of this. But we have not tackled that particular side of it. We feel that is for the AI task force to do in the matrix and part of DFE's remit. What we're suggesting is that businesses also adopt a human oversight team as well, because using technologies that businesses have in government, and we would like to use more of those technologies, we need to be assured of that they adhere to what we need to do with that. But in terms of regulatory frameworks for businesses, that's not what we've focused on.
So are the 2 processes speaking to each other?
Yes, I sit on their task force.
And while I take your point that there are 2 different scenarios, nevertheless, in terms of public service in relation to government, mm-hmm. which has responsibility for providing at least an interface or some kind of a navigational tool for businesses in relation to managing the regulatory framework, mm-hmm. Because that's the space that government now finds itself in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that is something that I think we need to work up in conjunction together on this. I know that this is actually something that AICT have done a lot of work in this space, and we're sitting around the table with them. We're sitting around the table to make sure that we can take on any learnings as to what we need to do as well. This is a consultation. if stakeholders, I invite everybody, add in the bits and pieces that you feel that we need to cover that we have not covered at this point. This can't be a strategy, though, for everyone when we've so much to do in the public sector. So, yeah, no, take your point.
Thanks.
Thanks, Declan.
Thank you, Declan. Sinead?
Thank you again, Helen. This has been a really fascinating conversation, and I think I'm really glad actually Declan raised, looking at other regions and areas as well, because I think that's really important. I would say that there is no government in the world or no devolved administration on these islands or in the government of the Republic of Ireland that is not looking at this. And there would be a lot of synergy in and around them. There might be kind of differentiation in your values and your principles and that, but like literally we're all trying to solve the same problems in terms of governance and more responsive government as well. And I think probably just working smarter with other devolved administrations is something that we should be looking at as well. But one of the things kind of in your report and the matrix report, it warns of peripheral regions that the risk of falling behind in the AI transition due to weaker infrastructure and skills and investment. Are there any safeguards? Are you looking at this, any protections that the department is looking at so that we're not driving greater inequality? And I say this because even today in the Beltel, there was an article from Professor John Turner from the Queen's University Business School, where he was speaking about AI and saying that workers in Northern Ireland are more exposed to AI than elsewhere in the United Kingdom because we're more reliant on low paying jobs and low productivity, sectors, and therefore more exposed. Have you had a look at the exposure that we are? I know there's loads of opportunities, but there are areas that we are exposed. And how are you dealing with that as a challenge and a risk?
Good question. So one of the stakeholders that has fed into this strategy is the Strategic Policy Unit in Ulster University, and they did a survey essentially on engagement and the public's view on AI. And while we are very digitally aware, 1 in 5 essentially do not have the digital skills that are required. So, then if you caveat that with we are 93 or 94% on complete fibre broadband, you're exposed quite a lot without having those digital skills in place. It's very interesting you say this. I know Department of Justice are taking forward some work on putting in legislation around deepfakes, etc. on this. This is something that we need to be very aware of. And as we move forward in this strategy, I think there's going to be more, we can't widen the digital divide. We have essentially got to try and draw that closer together, which is why it was really great to see in the Matrix report that skills and training across all levels is critical to do this in a safe way. I think you could widen that out, obviously, into my realm, which is in the universities, where actually AI is not for tech subjects. The people that are most exposed to this are those that are not in the tech subjects. There are those that are doing the languages, the English, etc. AI is as critical to be taught across there as it is across any other tech area. People think, it's the convergence of computing and data science, etc. Therefore, it's only their problem. It's actually not. It needs to be core criteria across every subject that we teach. And that is why, on a more broad note, and I'm delighted that the Minister of the Economy has really taken this STEAM rather than STEM. Technology and AI is critically important no matter what your perceived area or perceived background is. So I don't have the answers in totality on this, Sinead, but what I can say is it is something that we're acutely aware of, and we need to track this as we go along.
Yeah, and I suppose, Professor John Turner also said, the low pay and high AI exposure would hit certain sectors, and we talked about sales occupations, administrative. We've talked about some of that when we're talking about even developing business cases now. But business and public services and the associated type. How can we protect those areas that are heavily dependent on that? And I'm thinking of my own constituency. And when you look at 80 to 90% of AI firms and employment are actually based currently in the Belfast area, the rest of Northern Ireland is extremely exposed to that influence. So I'm just wondering, within the strategy, are we taking cognizance of that? And one of the other observations that I made too is that Northern Ireland should have a second wave AI strategy, not to be a first responder as such. And I just thought it was a very interesting piece, and I'm just wondering what's your thoughts on that as well.
Okay, so you will be aware that the task force is taking forward recommendation 8, which is to launch, from the Matrix report, was to launch an AI skills surge programme. And essentially that is to create flexible AI skills to all workers and businesses. Now that means that there is no criteria. This is open to all. So in terms of the strategy, how do we feed into that? We propose an awareness raising campaign to showcase publicly available online AI training. We advocate for AI essentials to be built into training requirements. We also want trainees in human oversight teams. And we also say that, in terms of public-private sector collaboration, we want to have an emphasis on the public and the private working together hand in glove with this. So there were 3 recommendations that are being taken forward from the Matrix. Recommendation 1 is to launch a scaled AI confidence and capability across public and private sector leaders, and we feed into that. There is transform existing businesses. Again, we advocate for expansion of AICC to do this. We highlight the role of HE and FE in helping businesses to do this. We call for new AI career pathways in the civil service and beyond. We call for the role of citizens to highlight this and to make them aware of what's going on. So each of recommendation 1, 5 and 8 is covered off in the strategy. And that answers your second question on the second wave. So you're absolutely correct in what you say there in terms of sometimes you can learn from first use cases and apply it to second use cases. And what we've learnt from, and it's what Declan was asking further about, other countries that have gone ahead and produced a strategy. What we've done is we've understood, first of all, the role that DFE are going to play in business. We've understood internally how digital is going to work and what needs to be done in digital. So not everything needs to be done in digital, but there's some things need to be done. We've set up, led by DFE with HR, there's essentially a people strategy that's looking at digital skills, of which AI is a part. We've understood that in terms of training, there's the core administrative training, there's the tools that we've worked out across our network that we need to flow through, and then there's the high-end AI engineers to do the really complex data that could inform some policies in other departments. But then in order to do that, we're looking at the data strategy and we're looking at what needs to be changed in the data strategy. So you might say, okay, the strategy is coming out and it's, 6 months, 9 months behind the last devolved administration. But what you will see is that every facet of it has been thought out, and that these various interconnectors are already up and running and figuring out exactly what it is we need to do. And I think that is our second wave advantage in this strategy, in that we actually know how we're going to do this, where if we did just put the strategy out there, we then may have kind of had to sit down and go, well, how do we do this? Whereas we've got all of these leads in the various bodies that we're all connected in on. So,
and even first failures as well.
Well, and you know what? I think you learn the most from the things you fail at. So we shouldn't be.
I mean, I think we're in a really, really interesting time, and the potential for more responsive government. Even if you look at some of the issues in the province that we do have, like, for example, just planning, just as one of them there, how slow and how bogged down we are. And a lot of it depends on trying to get data and understand data and do all of that. I mean, the potential for transformation is incredible. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the strategy coming out and the consultation process and working through it. Okay, thank you.
That's the second tool that they've identified that is an issue that needs to be solved. So across all departments.
Patrick.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks again for your presentation. A lot of my questions have been covered, and I suppose will be recurrent themes throughout. But my one was around access particularly, and it's really reassuring to hear that that's been factored in throughout your discussions. I'm thinking particularly of people who don't have access to digital technologies at present, whether that be for financial reasons or whether that it is people who maybe are furthest from the workforce for various reasons. So in terms of factoring those communities and those varied communities into the strategy, I suppose I would like to get a better understanding of what sort of consultation was had with them, what equality impact assessments were done, how were their voices heard, and the instance that I suppose I'll use from our own committee was around the smart metering. So that was something very much when it came up that I had quite a number of concerns, of course saw the opportunities around, but had quite a number of concerns around how this would impact people who were perhaps living in most acute fuel poverty, or those communities who we know are already struggling to heat their homes, put food on the table, and so on. So how are those communities being reached, and how are they part of the strategy?
Okay, so in terms of, I don't know if you've seen, but the South have created an AI-ready.ie hub, which is pretty good, and both universities have hubs that are freely available that you can dock into to find out more information. I take your point on, though, some communities or some areas in particular may not have that digital access, and that is something, again, that was discussed in the People Strategy, but also discussed more broadly on how do we make sure that we do make those available. What is it that we need to do? Now, whenever we look at all of this, we've engaged with NICFA quite a lot on this, and we will continue to do so as one of the stakeholders, and we have made some relevant points there that we can't further the divide between essentially the digital divide, the AI divide, all of those divides. We would really value feedback from yourselves and others in this strategy to figure out exactly, have we got enough in here? Do we need to put more in here? Or what is it like for people on the ground? What do we need to put in that isn't currently happening right now? So, Padraig, I don't have all the answers to your questions, but what I do have is a willingness to hear back from what you say and tell us what are we missing in this strategy.
No, look, appreciate that, and I think that's something certainly for us to take away and look at. It's definitely been one of the concerns that has been raised with me around that, and I suppose one of the key parts is that most people, when they hear it, think of it as a workplace tool, rather than in terms of integrating into household life and the general life. So it's perhaps talking up the benefits for wider society, but it's about that access piece as well. So look, I mean, my second question is really in the same vein. So I think prior to asking that, it is better that, I suppose, we as a committee go away and have those conversations, work out who can be consulted with. It's reassuring that NICFA have been part of that. But I think that those challenges certainly need to be forefront of our mind going forward. So thanks.
Thank you, Patrick. And Deputy Chair.
Thank you, and thanks very much for this. You had touched briefly on it. I just wanted to pick up very briefly. I also sit on the Finance Committee. We have been down at Goodwood House going through the Integrate programme, and you'd talked a little bit about that. So my question was, but you partially covered it. In terms of you sitting there with that specialisation, you've got this framework. I was just a bit concerned, thinking, are these IT digitisation services going into place without you having, a mechanism to be involved in that? But I think you're kind of saying you are involved in the likes of Integrate, because they had said to us, all of these things that are happening in our IT systems. It was quite surprising for me whenever I heard how basic some of the systems are in terms of, the HR and the finances and how they don't interact. And I know a lot of my assembly questions probably cause them headaches because I am asking things that I think that should be quite simply analysed. So a lot of their answers to me on that was, well, under Integrate, AI will be able to be picking out all of these trends and doing that very, very simply. So I was just going to ask you, what interaction have you had with that? Because I see this as, there's such a big spend, it's such a significant, and David talked about PAC, or looking at, the major IT projects. I wouldn't want to see it going forward and missing the opportunity for you to come in as an expert at this point, during the development of the project. So I just wanted to ask a little bit about that.
Yeah, okay. So Paul Duffy's leading on the Integrate. Paul and I have had monthly meetings for quite some time, and Paul sits on the Government AI Network. Obviously, I can't be over everything, and nor should I be, because I trust me when I tell you, Paul is a much greater expert in this place than I would be on that. But what I would say is, I know what he's doing. He knows what we're trying to do and trying to achieve, and we're very open and transparent about what we're trying to achieve. We don't, there's no secret sauce. We're very clear centrally. These are the things we can do. These are the things we can't do. What we would and in when DFM launched this consultation, we as a team are very happy to go out and talk to anybody anywhere that wants to talk about this and what we're trying to achieve. And again, you can't possibly cover everything off. In terms of the various players in all of this, we are all connected in. We do all sit pretty much on the same sort of groupings together, and we are involved and aware of all the projects that are ongoing. So the other project that DOF are taking forward under Colin Dash is that one I was saying about the records and the records management of that, which again has been in an archaic system. And so we need to, and actually it's very interesting, we would be the first country in the world to move each one of our records from each, if we can do it across all departments. Now, of course we can do this because of our size, but the ambition is there to do that, which I think is pretty exciting.
No, absolutely, and I think that's brilliant. I'm glad to hear it, because we've got all these, as I say, the Audit Office reports, hundreds of millions of pounds in IT projects that are designed at a point of time. Because of the delays, they're getting delivered at a system that's out of date. It's really concerning to think they aren't, wouldn't be staying live. So it's brilliant to hear that sort of moving away from silo government, you working closely with them, that collaboration. I think it's really, really good to hear that. So thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Helen. Thank you very much for your time and your expertise. And as I say, congratulations on a record turnaround from a strategy from the Executive Office.
Thank you very much.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Okay, Peter. So members, just from the previous briefing on the Local Innovation Partnerships Fund programme, is the committee content to seek a further update on that? And then in respect of what we've just heard, is the committee content to share the information you've just received with the Committee for Finance, which is currently undertaking an inquiry into the performance and culture of the Northern Ireland Civil Service? And perhaps the committee would want to seek a further update from the AI Advisory Panel on the anticipated development of a wider AI economic strategy and the AI Skills Surge programme, which we just heard about.
Members content? Yeah, Patrick.
Yeah, no, content with that. Just add to that as well, I think the point on NICFA was one which we need to do a bit more looking into, just around this and the impact of it, because obviously as an economy committee, one of our key roles is ensuring that everyone has equal access to that within the economy. So I think it could be useful for us to either hear from NICFA specifically on this, or else if they had any written submissions which they could share with committee on it. So my proposal is that we either write to them to invite them to committee, or if there is a written submission that we could put into correspondence, that would be useful too.
Okay, you could tempt maybe Patrick, we seek written correspondence in the first instance, and then we can discuss that and then bring them in if necessary.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lovely, marvellous.
Okay, all agreed. Okay, second one, anything else, Peter? No?
Oh, no,
No, that's all of them. Okay, perfect. Item 8 then, member student support and repayments regulation. The department has laid the statutory rule SR 2026-87, the Education Student Support and Repayment Amendment Regulation Northern Ireland 2026. The rule will be subject to negative resolution and will come into effect from the 26-27 academic year. Northern Ireland students studying for a postgraduate qualification can apply for a postgraduate tuition fee loan of up to £6,500. This will increase to £10,000. The committee launched a call for evidence for views in March. No responses were received. The committee indicated on the 6th of May that it was content for the department to make the rule. The ESR has reported on the rule and has no comment to make. So there's further information, members, at page 338, 346, 359 and 361. If members have any questions? If not, I put to the committee that the Committee for the Economy has considered SR 87-2026, the Education Student Support and Repayment Amendment Regulation Northern Ireland 2026, and has no objection to the rule. Are members content? Okay, thank you. We then move on to correspondence, members, which there are quite a few. So if we start at page 371, so item 2 is correspondence from the Permanent Secretary advising that the committee, in the absence of an agreed budget, contingency amount has been issued to all departments and ALBs of 94%. Are colleagues content to note pending the forthcoming ministerial briefing on the budget? Members content? Okay. Item 3 is a response reporting a reduction in staff vacancy levels. Further detail is provided. Any issue with to raise on this, Deputy Chair?
Yeah, it's quite high, 22% vacancy rate. I just wonder when was that total number last reviewed, how live it is there any sort of review ongoing, and how does that compare to other departments? And is it specifically in certain areas, like we've talked about this, in certain different departments as it's came before, the staffing pressure? So I just think that's 22% vacancies is very high.
Intend to write to the department. Clarity.
Okay, item 4, members, is ministerial response clarifying that the £2.5 million for... Oh, sorry, Patrick, apologies.
You're right. You're right. Just on that, content to write to the department to seek clarification on that. But I think just on that, we need to note the funding pressures that they're facing, because I would imagine, my understanding is that that is the key driver of this. So I just think we need to acknowledge that.
Oh, 100%. We'll do that. Thank you, sir. Item 4, members are asked to do a ministerial response clarifying that the 2.53 million secured for Go Succeed is from the Local Growth Fund administered by the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government. Members content to note? Okay. Item 5, members are asked to note correspondence from the Committee for Finance. Members content to note? I move to the section on energy correspondence. Item 6 is departmental response on development of energy policy and respective storage and interconnection. Will all be published at some stage later this year. Members content to note. Item 7 is a departmental response on CBAM. Is the committee content to note pending the forthcoming briefing by the UR?
Yep.
Thank you. Item 8, departmental response in respect of renewable electricity targets. Members content to note. Thank you. Item 9 again for noting is departmental response on community energy. Content. Item 10 is for noting is on the departmental holding response on the energy efficiency capital grant scheme. Members content to note. Thank you. Item 11 for noting is consultation on geothermal energy. Members content to note. Item 12 then, moving into other departmental policy matters, is correspondence from Invest NI. Members content to note. Item 13 from the department. Members content to note. Thank you. Item 14, members are asked to note departmental response on the All Ireland Strategic Tourism Group. So advising that the All Ireland Strategic Tourism Group will not provide oral evidence to the committee.
I just think this is we're going round circles really, and they're going back and forward, and appreciate Peter going back and forward with them. Is this something we could actually fire to the North-South Parliamentary group and go, guys, can you get them in front of everybody and answer to there?
I think, Chairperson, because we were talking to ministers in the Republic of Ireland, it's common practice, good manners. I dropped the clerk of that committee a wee email, and he then went and put in front of this committee, which I didn't expect. And so one of the members of the Joint Committee is one Senator Conor Murphy, who you may know. So what I think they're going to propose is an informal joint meeting between this committee and their committee, possibly in Armagh or possibly in County Down. They may discuss these issues, so we may then be able to get either Fulcha Ireland or the relevant ROI department in front of them.
It's even better. I wasn't sure if you could have a joint committee north-south. So
it would be informal. It's just informal.
Yeah, that's fine. I just think we need to get them in front of us.
Okay, members happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay, item 15, departmental response of draft Irish language policy. Members can take a note.
Yep.
Item 16 is departmental response on barrier busting task force. Members can take a note.
Yeah.
Item 17 is for noting on City of Derry Airport. Members can take a note. Thank you. Item 18 is a copy of the partnership agreement between the Department and the Consumer Council. Members can take a note. Move then to early learning and childcare. Item 19, members are asked to note Departmental of Education response confirming that Sure Start signpost families to relevant organisations. Members can take a note. Item 20, again for noting, is a response from the Education Minister. Members can take a note. Okay, 21 for noting is from the Health Minister. Members can take a note.
And it's down.
Oh, down.
Yeah, thank you. And again, this is really welcome, removing those checks for GPs. And I wonder, so that's kind of came through. I don't really think it's got that much press. No. And I would just be, since it was feedback from colleges that it's affecting people getting placements, affecting people taking childcare courses, I wonder, is there anything that we can ask Department for Economy? Are they pushing that out to make it aware to people who are doing training, who are doing courses, that this isn't a check anymore? So just to encourage people not to be deterred from working in the childcare sector in advance of the September admissions process.
Is it content?
Yeah.
Okay. Item 22 for noting, members content.
Yeah.
Item 23 for noting, members content. Item 24 is the Convention Rights Memorandum for the Petroleum Exploration and Licensing Repeal Bill. This is a committee content to write to the Department in respect of its position for existing licensing and the making of the regulations. Thank you. Item 25 is for noting, members content. Okay. Item 26 is correspondence from the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. Members content that the clerk prepare a response.
Yeah.
Thank you. Item 27, members are asked to note correspondence from Department for Business and Trade. Content. Item 28 is response from Queen's University. Members content to note. Item 29 is for noting from the Youth Assembly. Item 30 is an invitation that is passed, so members content to note. Item 31 is an invitation from children in Northern Ireland to launch their research. Is the committee content to note, and members respond individually? Yep. Okay. Item 32 is a copy of a letter from CBI and IBEC. Members content to note. Item 33 is for noting as a written briefing from a concerned individual. Content to note. And then item 34 is again a correspondence from a concerned individual. Members content to note. Okay, forward work programme, Peter.
Members, just a quick one, and I will be brief. If you look at page 592, the committee had agreed to undertake a joint concurrent with the Committee for Education. What it's going to be about was skills and the interaction between that and Transform ED NI strategy. So that strategy, as you're aware, includes a number of things, a review of qualifications, but also there will be a legal requirement for young people to remain in education until 18. So just officials were a little bit confused. So I had a chat with them. What I've set out there is what I think the focus of that meeting would be about. So you'd be talking about how that developing strategy, which we heard about today, will interact with the skills action plan, which has got all sorts of things in it, like the mainstreaming of traineeships at FE. So how would the education, the change the qualifications at schools, support the mainstreaming of traineeships at FE? There's stuff around I think there are planned changes to the school curriculum which would make it a little bit more knowledge guided, and that would therefore inform a revision to qualifications. There's also a piece in the Skills Action Plan about supporting underrepresented groups at school and FE to get the HE. So it's really about all of those things, and also there's the piece about careers, of course, and where that is, because it sits with the two departments. Initially, there's also in Transform Ed, it also talks about the initial teacher education curriculum. So as you're aware, that curriculum is set by DE, but the teachers, the actual numbers, that's paid for by DFE through the autonomous organisations that deliver that training. So And as we're all aware, there is a big demographic change coming with the school population set to fall, and likewise that will hit the third sector too, third level education too. So it's really just to cover all of those. If members are content, that's what we're going to chat about on the 17th of June. That is fab. Okay then. And the other bit then, if we look at the... Oh, sorry.
Do you want in there, Patrick?
Yeah, no, just on the careers. I think I'll wait till the next bit, because I think the next bit is about Intus anyway, so I'll wait and come in on both.
Okay, so just in terms of our forward work programme, look, apologies for this, next week's really quite thin. We've had a couple of organisations that dropped out unexpectedly. So what I propose to do is next week have transmission investment, talking about Lyric, but then we'll have a little informal session where we can just chat about our strategic plan for the rest of the mandate and how we're going to manage all of these bills. Further to that, Ms McLaughlin's bill, haven't seen that yet. I don't know that it's going to pass second stage. I know nothing about it, but it's what we normally do with any bill that's coming, is that I would chat to the sponsor of the bill and beg them to share their stakeholder list with us, because what we will then do is look at it, put on, make sure that the email addresses work, so that if and when it does pass second stage, we can fire off a call for evidence really quickly. So I'm asking the committee if they're content for me just to formally seek that from the sponsor of the Regional Balance Bill. And again, that's not saying that you're supporting it or opposing it or what's going to happen at second stage. If members are content for me to do that.
Great.
Thanks, members. And then other stuff is 3rd of June. We're going to be hearing about regional balance. We're also going to be hearing from the department about the HE widening participation. And Mr. Delargay contacted me and suggested we also invite Intus to come along and talk about widening participation in adult learning. If the committee are content, they're very keen, but I just need the committee to formally agree. Very good. Additionally then, looking ahead, on the 17th of June, as just said, we're going to have that joint concurrent. We'll start maybe at 9:45 and we'll get a little briefing from the department, our department, on, they've done a consultation on tourism inspection and categorisation. This was the subject of, it's in the Administrative Financial Provisions Bill. There was a regular expenditure, they're regularising things and they're trying to sort it all out. So we'll get that done if members are content that day. As you also know then, 24th of June, that's where we're going to hear from UU and also from the unions in respect of that. The Minister has kindly agreed to come and brief on the budget and her plans for the rest of the mandate, I hope. Now, she hasn't confirmed a date yet, but it could be Tuesday the 23rd at, say, 9:30 to 11. But they haven't really confirmed. So if we hold the date for now, if that's okay. I know it's not the best, members, but if you can, that'll be brilliant. The other thing then is that in terms of Cantor Fitzgerald and the Boston event, the correspondence...
1st of July.
Yeah.
So that's set out. Okay.
So if that's okay, if that's all right,
members
for 1st of July.
Patrick, do you want to come in there, sir?
Yeah, no, on the Intus stuff, content,
yes.
And I met with them recently. I think, it's very worthwhile in that discussion. The other thing was around the joint session with education. I think when we're talking about careers, one of the key parts that we've discussed as a committee in that is around the potential for student mobility, all Ireland career opportunities. So I think just when we're preparing for that, if information can be provided to the committee, Peter, either via yourself or the department, just around that, because that has been a consistent thing we've looked at. So I think it's important that that's part of our discussion.
Okay, so I will queue up the department that they can expect questions on how careers advice will help students to understand the student mobility options and what the support is and all that, if that's members are content with that.
Great.
I think Ms. Forsyth has something.
Yeah, just whenever next week is light and I don't see any of this coming through, I wonder could we write to the department to ask, given that it is the end of May, to provide their final 25-26 figures, where they ended with the budget, what has crossed over from one year to the next, and just a little bit of detail, because I saw the Permanent Secretary had written in about spending at 94%. We know that would mean 134 million of pressures on this year, and the vote on account drawdowns, Department for Economy is significantly higher than other departments, so I'd be keen to know what their cash flow pattern is through the year. So if that sort of information could be asked.
It's just appeared
it's like
in our inbox.
I knew that was coming.
So if members are content with that.
I just think it would be good, and if anyone was available to even talk about it, because I just think that it is important to know where we landed for 25-26 before we move forward and look at that.
Right, we'll seek that for next week if we possibly can.
Sinead.
Chair, sorry, can I just come in? Concerns have been expressed to me regarding REPG, just where it is. The sector themselves are really concerned that we're going to lose investment opportunities if it time slides on any further. Have we any concrete update where we are with all of this?
The last I got was in a personal capacity, Sinead. I just got an answer from an AQW on Monday to say that it was the Minister's intention to bring forward the paving legislation before the summer recess, but obviously as a committee we can seek further clarity.
Can do that, and again, just as the chair's indicated, I think the last thing I was told, the committee was told, was that I understood a policy paper going through the executive and
To draft the bill, yeah.
Yes, so they've gone off to draft the bill. So the bill was in drafting, and as the chair's just said, we were expecting that before summer recess. That's what
It's
they said.
still in drafting.
Yes.
Right, okay. So we have every reason to be concerned then at this stage.
We can seek an update.
Right to department and seek update. Yep.
Any other business colleagues? If not, then we will adjourn now and see everyone next week. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, members. Well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you next time.
Committee Room 30, sound. 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 Committee Room 30,